The first concert of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra's 2025-2026 season is being described as a lively dance through the seasons, a great match for the changing seasons occurring right now in the city of Winnipeg. The program is called Seasons Ascending. It will feature superstar Canadian violinist Kerson Leong as soloist and leader. Together, Leong and the MCO will share remade arrangements of music by Antonio Vivaldi and Ralph Vaughan Williams, as well as music by Edvard Grieg. Kerson Leong joins us now to tell us more about the program. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Nolan.
Thanks so much for taking the time. So you've traveled extensively in the last number of months since you were last in Winnipeg. What does it mean to you to be coming back to make music once again in this city?
Yeah, well, I had a great time and a great memory of Winnipeg the first time when I was there with Winnipeg Symphony, and of course now with the Manitoba Chamber, I've heard a lot of great things. First of all, about the ensemble, but also just the warmth of the audience and the vitality in the community. I think that's always super interesting and gratifying for me as a traveling musician to experience, wherever you go. But I think Winnipeg really did make a very warm impression on me, so I look forward to that.
So when you're coming into a new experience with a new ensemble, what does that look like for you, and how do you get acquainted with one another musically?
Yeah, it's a great question since it's almost like a dance in communication, without words. It's sort of, I find that actually you can get to know someone or people very well, especially well through music and through listening and through just, sort of endeavoring to play together. Um, but I think a lot of the initial, the getting to know part really happens in the first few minutes, really, is that then you can really get a measure of an ensemble in this case, and what the tendencies are, and also what, let's say, what kind of sound signature and all that. And then you yourself, you can also choose to, let's say, meld with that in whatever way you wish and to respond to that. And I think that's the wonderful thing about making music together as a group, is that it's always an exchange. It's always an exercise really in listening and communication, and so that's, yeah, it's very fulfilling in that way, and also yields very interesting results that can change depending on the occasion. So
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you describe that sort of getting to know each other as a dance in this sort of learning of each other's musical languages, because as we mentioned, this program, Seasons Ascending, being described as a lively dance through the seasons. Images of fall abound in this program that kind of indicate the season. We got birds ascending, perhaps to fly south for the winter. You've got literal seasons changing with Antonio Vivaldi, or this reimagining by Max Richter. What does it mean to be sharing this music in these fall days?
absolutely, I think there's a huge emphasis on atmosphere in this program. This Max Richter, of course, working within sort of a more minimalist style, has reworked the Vivaldi Four Seasons in a way that focuses very much on atmosphere and on setting, let's say, like a sonic canvas for your imagination, for you to conjure up, certain images and all that stuff, and also in as a complementary piece as well. In the second half of the program, there's also the Lark Ascending, of course, which is a very iconic piece, by Vaughan Williams, and that, of course, depicting the flight of birds, but also just generally a very pastoral, a very, sort of, you can imagine yourself deep in the countryside, rolling hills, and perhaps, sort of warm colors, in that sense, very, very homey and very, very comforting. So I think that actually suits the idea of autumn very, very well. And then, of course, there's, Holberg Suite, which also has a certain countryside element to it, has a certain rustic element as well. So I mean, it's very much sort of, I guess, encouraging everyone to go and see the colors and go and see the changing
Hmm.
leaves, before they go, and yeah, but it's bursting with colors and with atmosphere, so everyone can expect to be immersed in this concert in that way. Yeah.
So you're someone who has performed as a violin soloist, I'm sure, in the original arrangement of the Lark Ascending, or at least you've performed that in other venues. Of course, we're thinking about Vivaldi and what violinist doesn't want to play the seasons. These, of course, rearrangements of those pieces, although Max Richter's version of the seasons is now one of the more famous and most well-streamed classical music albums of the last number of years. Is there any difference in approach when it comes to taking on the Lark Ascending in just a string ensemble, for instance, or in taking on Vivaldi in this reimagined minimalist manner?
Yeah, certainly. I think it always gives a chance to see things from a fresh angle, from a fresh start, perhaps. In a case of the Lark Ascending, first of all, I think to do it with string orchestra, well, first of all, it's of course, it's a more intimate ensemble with strings only. It's sort of one thing I love about just string orchestra work in general, or working with a string orchestra, is that you have that contrast, or you have that perfect combination of grandeur and intimacy, like in the sense that you do have the amplitude of an orchestra, but you do know every player, let's say, or you get to know every player by name, by first name
Yeah.
basis, and so that's a very special thing. There is a certain, I think, first of all, strings only, it suits the piece very well in a way, in its own way. First of all, just the colors and the fact that it's enveloping music. It brings you with you, and it's sort of yeah, it's it's an opportunity to explore perhaps finer colors, or
Mm.
to explore, let's say, um, the melodies and the harmonies in a more intimate way, which is wonderfully, fulfilling in itself, because sometimes it's often, let's say, the intimate moments that, or intimacy, that projects the most when you draw people in. And in the case of the Max Richter, I think it's just, because it's very, let's say, it takes a lot of fragments of Vivaldi
Mm.
material and recombines them and does it into something that's very, that paints a very large canvas, as I said, and sort of, it warrants perhaps a slightly different approach, in the sense that you're thinking very long term. You're thinking in terms of adding one color and then adding the next, and then sort of
Mm.
seeing how you can build, and you can almost anticipate a very vivid and wide picture that's unfolding in front of you. So yeah, it's fascinating. There's so much that you can do with just strings, because it's an incredibly
Yeah.
wide palette. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you take away from performing these arrangements of these pieces when you then return to perform their more famous typical arrangements? Vaughan Williams, for instance, with a full orchestral complement, or the original Vivaldi seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, every time that doesn't necessarily even, have to be the difference between, let's say, the full orchestral arrangement and the string orchestra. Like, even if you do it with multiple, like many different string orchestras or many different orchestras, each ensemble brings you know, its own inspiration, or its own color palette, in a way. And so
Mm.
you take that, and every single time, let's say, that someone does something in the ensemble that makes you double take, and makes you sort of think, oh, that was very interesting, and that I want to actually explore that color a little bit. And then you take that to the next performance, and so on and so forth. It's a never-ending process. And
Mm.
so, but in this case, of course, the intimacy of playing the Lark Ascending, for example, with string orchestra, does help you explore, let's say, certain colors, or certain softness of colors, or intimacy of colors, that perhaps it wouldn't, sort of immediately occur to you in the full orchestra setting, as it is, of course, bigger. But in terms of, but it's something that then you can take with you and then manifest into something very different. So it's a never-ending process in that way.
So, in the same way that you are getting new colors, new experiences, bringing those experiences into your playing, obviously this music will impact the audience that comes to hear it this week at the Crescent Arts Center. What do you hope that this program adds to the experience of fall for those who come to see Seasons Ascending?
Well, just for everyone to come out of the concert with even warmer hearts and with even more, let's say, just like, hot chocolate down down the, I think because this, in a way, this kind of program, it really is that. I mean, it's the colors and it's very much feel good music, but at the same time, it's full of intricacy, it's full of depth, it's full of real, well, depth and sincerity of feeling, you know,
Mhm.
and in that sense, it's, let's say, not just aesthetically pleasing music, but in a sense that can really, at least for me, when I perform these works, like for example, the Lark Ascending, and to explore some of these moments that really can draw people in. I mean, it's always a very emotional affair, and it's very cathartic in a way. So I think that's I think something that I hope would set people up for fall, in a very positive and a very warm way.
We'll look forward to being set up for this season with warmth this Wednesday night, 7:30 at the Crescent Arts Center. We'll have more information at our website, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Kerson Leong, we're so excited to welcome you back to Winnipeg for this concert, and all the best for the performance.
Thank you so much, and I'm so looking forward as well.